Often when retirement is visually described, there's a bench, there's a beach, and there's a couple sitting tranquilly hand in hand, normally overlooking the sea. However, here's the reality. The transition to retirement, or whatever the next chapter is in your life, involves quite a lot of change. And change in whatever is shaping our lives involves a bunch of complex emotions, often including shock, denial and frustration. Everybody talks about change like it's easy. However, what a lot of people don't do is talk about the complex emotions and thinking about those complex emotions we go through when navigating that change. So in this video, I want to explore what the research says about navigating change and the 4 practical things you can do to help you navigate change, particularly if you're in your 50s and 60s and thinking about what happens next in a better way. Welcome to What Happens Next. If you've spent decades becoming competent, your knowledge and skills useful to other people, and finding purpose through being useful, it's often jarring when, slowly but surely, that old script doesn't fit you anymore. You feel like something has to change, and there's a quiet friction that goes on often in our 50s and 60s where we're thinking about change, but we don't know how to get there. Because let's face it, change is difficult. Because from the outside, people say you've got a great life, but inside, the emotions that are going on are often tough to navigate. The good news is psychology gives us a helpful lens, and that's called the change curve. It was designed by a psychologist called Elisabeth Kübler-Ross many years ago, originally to help people cope with grief, but actually is a great tool to help us think about how we navigate change in our life. In plain English, it talks about the fact that major life transitions have an emotional shape, and all of us go through these emotions in a different speed, different pace, and with different intensity. But often change happens like this. We tend to start with shock and denial. We go through frustration and the messy middle of where we're working out what our next chapter is. Then we get into experimenting with that next chapter, making a decision, and finally settling into the next chapter of our lives. The reality is, for the majority of us, the transition into the next chapter of your life isn't smooth. It's messy, like any fundamental life change is. However, by recognising the fact that we all go through this change in a messy way, and we've got to do it whilst handling the complex emotions as we navigate this, it might allow us to understand that these emotions aren't things we should feel bad about. We should actually appreciate they're just part of the process. Now, if you've followed What Happens Next for a while, you'll be aware of Mike's story. After 3 decades in a senior engineering role, Mike came to us to do the numbers with him to work out whether he had enough financially. Then he made the ultimate decision, and we wouldn't recommend you do it like Mike did, by the way. Actually, we talk about often on What Happens Next, thinking about transition into the next stage of your life more as a flight path than a cliff. But Mike decided that after doing his job for a number of decades, he's definitely had enough. Now, the reason we recommend a flight path, not a cliff, is because of the text that I got from Mike on the 3rd of Jan, 2 years ago, that said, "Mr. Daems, is this what retirement looks like? Do I need to get out more, or do I need to get a life?" Now, when Mike sent me that text, and I asked him to come in and just help me understand a bit more about what he was going through, his first reaction was that he was bored. But actually, when we dug a bit deeper, there was a range of emotions going on that fit in with what Dr. Elisabeth Kübler-Ross talks about when she thinks about change. There's the shock of all this time when you've had so much structure in your life. There's the frustration of being a smart, motivated individual and not being able to work out immediately what this next chapter looks like. There's the denial that you'll work it out, and then the realisation that actually it takes a bit more time to navigate this change. And then there's that movement into trying new stuff, making choices, and integrating your new life into how you actually want to spend your time. In my 2 decades as a chartered financial planner, I've seen this change happen with my clients as they go into the next chapter of their lives many, many times. It's never the same because we're all different, but often there's similar themes, and the theme is change is a lot tougher than most people think. You see, many of us plan the financial leap well, but the emotional landscape, including the identity shift, the loss of structure, the need to still have meaning in our lives, is something I believe we don't focus prominently enough on. And I know Mike's not alone, because the amount of conversations I've had over the last 18 months on what happens next with our guests, but also informally when I'm talking about what happens next, is that people designed for the money think about the money, but don't think about the other elements their life's going to look like in the next chapter of their lives. So that's why I believe it's important to think about how we navigate change in our lives and being able to understand that this is emotionally complex. And in this video, because I don't want it to all be theory, I want there to be some practical things you can do. I'm going to talk about 4 things you can do today to better plan and prepare for that next chapter. I believe the first step, and this is my number 1, is awareness. So take a look at the research done by Dr. Kübler-Ross, particularly the change curve. Because what that gives you is a framework, it gives you a map to run on, and it gives you a realisation that actually change is difficult, and the emotions you're going through as you navigate this change aren't unique. Many people go through this change and navigate those emotions. Often when we're going through our own retirement or what happens next journey, it feels like we're alone. But understanding that actually change is difficult, and let's face it, retirement or whatever happens next is probably going to be one of the biggest changes in our lives. Realising we're not alone, and everybody goes through these emotions in varying degrees and in varying strengths, but goes through these emotions is really important, because change, particularly when it comes to our identity shifting, and that happens a lot when we leave work and go into the next chapter of our lives, the discomfort we feel in that change is entirely natural. After all, we've told ourselves stories about our identity for decades. When it no longer fits with our lives, that's not going to be a smooth or natural process. But here's the reality. Every major life transition includes a period where our old identity slowly unravels and morphs into a new one. William Bridges, in his brilliant book Transition, calls this the neutral zone. I call it the messy middle, and it's that strange in-between place where one chapter has ended, but the next one hasn't quite started. However, appreciating this fundamental change in our lives is emotionally turbulent to varying degrees and with varying emotions for everybody means you're not alone and might make that change a little bit easier. Tip number 2 is plan and prepare for what happens next with plenty of time to spare. Recently, I interviewed the brilliant Beck Wilson, author of Prime Time, and she provided unique insight into how change occurs in our 50s and 60s, and how one way we can make the transition from our life now to the life we want in a smooth way is just give us more road to run on. Make sure we're planning and preparing for it earlier. Because in our conversation, she described how so few people plan for that pre-retirement bit, and actually, instead of having that flight path, fall off a cliff when the time to stop their career that they've had for a number of decades comes. Rebecca calls the decade before we plan this fundamental change as our lifestyling phase. It's a window where the kids are probably grown up, the mortgage is easing off or gone, and we both have time and money to redesign our life in a way that works for us. The challenge we face is most people wait until retirement happens to them, rather than shaping it both gradually and intentionally. And according to Beck's research, only 31% of people retire with choice, by choice. The rest wait until retirement happens to them. I'd like you to think about that, and because I want you to make sure that you're one of the people who start planning now and retire with plenty of choice. I completely agree with Beck's insights that planning with plenty of time to spare is a step practically we can take to make sure that the transition into the next chapter is as smooth as possible. Being intentional about not only the money side, but how you want to spend your time, and potentially making the change gradually and incrementally, is a step practically that you can take today. So don't fall off the retirement cliff and let retirement happen to you. Create and design a flight path which allows you to ease into the next chapter of your life on your terms. As I record this, we haven't released Beck's interview yet, but if you want to be the first person to know when we release it, but also get access to all of the new insights on what happens next as soon as they come out, there's two really easy ways to do this. Firstly, you can subscribe to this channel, and you can do that by pressing the bell and pressing the subscribe button. We'd really appreciate you doing that. Or you can join the What Happens Next Inner Circle for free simply by clicking this QR code or clicking the link in the comments below, in the notes below, to take you straight to the page designed to make sure that as soon as we get really fresh content coming out, you're going to be one of the first people to know. The third practical thing you can do is speak to somebody who's recently gone through the journey of changing their lives into the next chapter and learn from their experience. One of the things I've been really fortunate to do on What Happens Next is interview a bunch of people who have recently retired or navigated into the next chapter of their lives about the challenges and experiences in that chapter. I definitely recommend you check out two interviews in particular, and we'll put all the links in the comments in the notes below. Certainly the interview with Daems is a must watch. There's loads of insight about planning and preparing, particularly the tip he talks about in terms of 60 paydays before starting to prepare for the next chapter. But also the interview with Tim Levy, who shared real useful insights. From chatting to people, I've learned two things. Firstly, the journey isn't always a bed of roses. It comes with unique challenges we could just simply do better with by being more aware of. And secondly, I think there's loads to learn just by having a conversation with people who have gone through that transition. So the practical thing you can do is ask somebody about that transition and learn from that experience. I'd suggest you want to ask the questions about what's good, but also what's challenging. Then you can better plan and navigate the next chapter of your life with insights from somebody who's experienced those changes. My last practical tip on this video is to think about running micro experiments in your own life. Micro experiments are just small incremental ways you can try stuff out. That might mean starting to reduce your work hours. Take Friday afternoons off work, for example. It might mean experimenting with a hobby you'd like to spend more time doing, you've always wanted to try, but you never had the time. It might mean trying out volunteering or pottery, or looking to set up a micro business when you've got a bit more time in your hands. The reality is that if we try these experiments on how we might spend our most valuable commodity, which actually is time, not money, then we can make sure the time we need to fill in the next chapter of our lives is a little less scary to feel. Let me be clear, change is tough for all of us. However, appreciating that change is difficult And it's likely you're going to go through a range of emotions as you transition into the next chapter. Knowing that is the starting point to helping you plan. Step one is appreciate that these negative emotions are entirely normal and everybody who's navigating significant change in their lives goes through them. Step two is to plan and prepare with plenty of time to spare so retirement doesn't simply happen to you, but you get to plan it intentionally. Step three is to speak to people about the challenges they've faced as they're going through the journey into the next chapter of their lives. And step four is to try some stuff out. Rapid, low-cost experiments so you can work out what the next chapter of your life, activity-wise, is going to be filled with. Now, there's two videos I think would be really useful complements to the video you've just watched. This video is all about memento mori, the concept of memento mori, and how thinking about death and the fact that one day we're not going to be here actually cannot be morbid, it can be really empowering. And in this video, I talk about the concept of low-cost experimentation and why it's such a powerful tool when you're thinking about the next chapter of your life. That's it for today. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you on the channel soon.